This feels more in the vein of what we know the genre to be. It says it's from the makers of The Killing, but I wasn't able to find what that meant, whether it meant the same producers
it was devised by, I'm going to butcher this name now,
Go on.
Leaf Hop.
Sounds right to me.
He was one of the people behind it, I believe. He was the screenwriter for The Killing.
So this is playing, as I say, in double bills. We've seen the first 2 episodes. This centres around Rolf. He's a respected detective in Copenhagen. He's got a wife and a baby of his own, a young baby, and he's called away when a baby of, I think, 14 months disappears from her nursery.
Toddler, yeah.
He is desperate to find this baby. She has a father who is an immigrant who they initially suspect, but he takes it over to the DNA lab, and his DNA isn't found on any of the clothing that they find of Mina, the baby's clothing nearby. While he's at the DNA facility, he meets up with a colleague who says, well, you're looking for a plan for your little one. We've got one. She's waiting. My wife's waiting for grandkids, but our kids are only young, so it's going to be a while. So why don't you come over, get this pram, and you'll be sorted. He gets the pram, and the family are really nice to him, and they invite him over for a meal. There's an insinuation that DNA has been found that matches a person in Poland, and so
well, it was a pack of Polish cigarettes, wasn't it, as well?
That was right. Yeah, a pack of Polish cigarettes found. His wife, who is back at work as an air hostess, leaves him alone, but the weather's bad, so the nanny can't come and look after his young girl. So he takes her to Poland on the ferry. He's very sick on the ferry.
With Joel Scalbo, who is the forensics expert. Expert. He comes with him, so he can help look after the baby and drive there.
So they're on the ferry, and basically he's in the toilet to be sick. He puts the brakes on the pushchair and leaves the baby for seconds. He even takes the monitor in the toilet with him so he can monitor any noise or anything. And when he comes out, the pushchair has disappeared, and the insinuation is that his young baby, Andrea, has either fallen overboard or has been taken. Annoyingly, this sequence that we see at the end is the identical sequence that we see at the start.
It's the Luke special.
Predictably, I had an issue with this because obviously we could see that coming.
Yeah.
Whereas if we didn't know that was about to happen, that would have been more shocking for us.
I don't know if we needed it. I don't know if it could have just started with something to do with the disappearance of this young girl from the nursery. They could have showed that, couldn't they? Or without revealing who it was, they could have shown this girl at nursery, maybe just something, if they didn't want to show.
Because it was quite a long scene, running into the captain and saying, my daughter's either gone overboard or she's been taken. Then he runs onto the ferry and starts harassing the people in their cars. And it sort of loses all impact when you've seen it 30 minutes ago and you're seeing it again. And you anticipate it because... when he gets out of the toilet, it's not a shock that the baby's gone.
You're waiting for it to happen. Yeah. It's not. You don't. I agree with that. You don't really need it. Again, it's one of those. As you always say, bear with us.
If you find this a bit dull, remember this bit's coming and it's quite exciting and intriguing. So that was sort of so-so. The second episode did something I wasn't expecting, where it moves the story on 5 years. Rolf is now split up from his wife. They've obviously couldn't cope with the grief, although she doesn't blame him.
Rolf still believes that she was abducted, whereas most other people feel that she fell overboard, didn't she, during this storm on the ferry.
She's died, and it's nobody's fault, and he shouldn't blame himself.
He decided he didn't want to be in the big city anymore. He wanted something where he could be isolated, so he's taken over as chief of this village police station, where I think he's the only person there patrolling the beat, if you will.
Meanwhile, the story does what all good Nordic noir stories do, and you meet this Polish girl who finds out at 19 that she's pregnant. She hasn't told anyone. She's only told a work colleague who has told her there is a doctor here that will perform an abortion for you for 2,000, let's say, pounds for the sake of euros. And
Zloty.
Lottie, sorry.
Zloty. Zloty.
Zloty.
Yeah.
All good things I'm learning. So you don't quite know how she links into the story. And then also we meet a soon-to-be colleague of Rolf's, Neil, I believe. She comes on the scene. She's this new police officer. She stops a man in a car who she suspects has been drinking because he's speeding. But as she's giving registration details, he speeds away, and it is determined that the car he was driving has been stolen and is actually the chief inspector's car, and which they find burnt out later.
They've got his DNA from the breathalyzer. Rolf just happens to be there, and Rolf is instructed by the chief inspector to take this back to Copenhagen to have it tested because I want to find out who stole my car. The DNA results come back as they cannot identify this person. Because of the room key, as you mentioned, found in the remains of the car, Neil is able to trace this to a surfing hostel where this girl Molly, the key belongs to. The other people at the hostel say Molly went home, she hitched a lift. She just happens upon this old woman who tells her the plot about this man who had just been released. He was this serial rapist and murderer who was the guy who stole the car and has abducted Molly. The question is then, why did the forensic people not spot it? And it was something to do with mixed DNA when there's two DNA sources, because Neil wasn't wearing gloves, so her DNA was on there as well. And at the end, it is Rolf saying, I want them to reinvestigate my daughter's case, because if this has happened, if they haven't identified this guy who's on the systems, what have they missed with, I suppose, both my daughter and the little girl who disappeared in the first episode. I struggled initially to get into this a little bit. I found it very sort of generic. Crime by numbers, this disappearance girl. I think it got going for me when the actor Nicholas Bro appeared, who we know who plays Scalbo, the forensics expert, who we know from the second series of The Killing, where he played the Justice Minister, and the third series of The Bridge, where he was that art collector man. I don't know if you remember that. He's just got a great
incredible
presence to him, and this warmth to him, as you say, this thing with the pram where they invite the couple round on Halloween. He just adds something more to it, I think, and you know, he's almost this larger than life character without being too big, I suppose. I think as well in that second episode is almost completely different, and I think
it's a different show, and I loved it from
and I think you probably enjoyed the scenes with Julita, didn't you? The scenes in Poland.
But also the connection between Rolf and this young up and comer who calls on him every time for advice and help, and she's in the barn with this serial killer on her own and tackles him quite well and proficiently. And I'm intrigued, and I can't remember the last foreign drama that I watched that I went, I'm going to keep watching. I'm intrigued by this. I enjoyed it a lot. I would agree with everything you said about that first episode. We'd seen it 1,000 times. If it was a British crime drama, I'd be saying the same. Story seems quite plodding. People seem quite generic. And then it gets to that point where they invite him and his wife over for that impromptu meal when they collect the pram. And I've relaxed into it then. As good as his on-screen presence is, there was something about him I didn't trust.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. And I think, I don't know, we'll get onto it in the moment. Is it just because we've both seen The Third Day and we're a bit weary of
anybody that's nice?
But these sort of overly friendly couples in particular. There's the insinuation, you know, that there's two young girls who have gone missing. Is there something more to this now? Is there, you know, like some sort of abduction ring? You know, we're keeping Poland in there.
How do you feel, though? Are you going to stick with it too?
I don't know. I don't... It was a solid, as you say, I suppose, Scandi noir, as we would say. But I don't know if there was enough here to hook me in. I did like the second episode a lot more than the first, as you did. And Nicholas Bro is one of those character actors that is almost in as many of these as, say, the guy who was in Borgen as the environmental minister, who then popped up in Trapped and in what was the terrorist one? Was it
Below the Surface?
Below the Surface. I suppose you see all these actors, don't you, bob between. But no, I liked his performance. You know, I might watch one more. I might see what you know, if you are pursuing what your
Yeah,
views are.
I definitely will.
This.
Yeah, I've no idea where it's going to take us, and that's what intrigued me about it. And I liked a lot of the central performances. 9 o'clock on Saturday nights in that foreign drama slot, double bills on BBC4.